talking DOA, Dead or Alive. This is a 2006 video game adaptation directed by Corey Ewan, and is actually based off a series of video games called Dead or Alive, a one-on-one fighting game famous for the jiggly bits of its female characters. The Dead or Alive game also had a beach ball spin-off, and there's been loads of these kind of like fighting game movie adaptations. Of course, you've had Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, but you've also had Tekken, King of Fighters, so it stands to reason that obviously you get a Dead or Alive one as well. Now, what is the story? Well, it's kind of this thing you'd expect really from these type of films. It's essentially a tournament where the winners can win a £10 million or dollar cash prize. However, the organizer of this tournament, played by Eric Roberts, has got some nefarious schemes up his sleeves, and we've got a bevy of beauties in this one, including Holly Valance in her acting debut, Jamie Presley, Devon Aki, and many more. And it's essentially an excuse to have a series of fights, mostly with women in their underwear or bikinis. Let's discuss what works first of all. So Corey Ewan, the director here, is actually a very well-established martial arts director. Now, upon doing a little research to this movie, it was a troubled shoot because he did not speak English, and most of the crew were actually Chinese, and the vast majority did not speak English, whilst all of the cast are kind of English speaking, or the majority of the cast. And apparently there was only 2 crew members of the entire crew here that actually spoke both Chinese and English, or Mandarin and English. So you can imagine there was a little bit of communication issues with this film. So how does it turn out? What works? One thing that does work with this movie is it does have some exciting fight sequences. They're a little over the top, to be honest with you, a little bit overuse of wire work and things like this. But for a video game movie, you have to sort of, you know, let go of expectations of realism and just kind of enjoy the silliness that is on screen. And there's certainly lots of over-the-top action with beautiful women fighting kind of like themselves, or sometimes against guys, choreographed to the max, looking absolutely fantastic. Lots of kind of wire work, impossible jumps, things like this. Very stylistically kind of directed at times. And you have to say, they do a good job here of making actors who clearly aren't martial artists by trade actually kind of look quite good, both with, you know, training, special effects, wire work, and obviously stunt people as well. I have to say, I think for the most part, at least, there is a little bit of over-the-top wire work, as I said, but for the most part, I think the actual fight sequences are done very well. And one thing I did really enjoy was the destruction of the environments as the kind of our fighters have all these different kind of tournament fights anywhere within the, you know, hotel rooms, in the middle of a swimming pool, wherever it might be. They just fight wherever. So it's some quite kind of fun environments. The movie does have a sort of tongue-in-cheek fun feel to it. It isn't taking itself particularly seriously. This game series doesn't take itself particularly seriously. And the movie does reflect that, and we have a colourful bunch of kind of characters, some of which are served better than others, and they have kind of changed some aspects of some characters from the games here. It's an adaptation. It's gonna happen, unfortunately, but I think some characters work better than others. Some are very kind of taken straight out of the kind of the game. Others they've adapted and changed quite a bit. The movie's obviously quite well paced, being a fighting film. It's very kind of action heavy, and it's not long till we get the kind of the next kind of fight sequence. And I have to say, the location shooting here is all pretty good, and on a technical level, it's very proficiently made. You know, obviously, as I said, Corey, you're an experienced kind of like martial arts movie maker here, and it does show on screen. And some of the characters, although not the best acted ever, they're still kind of quite fun and kind of memorable to a certain point. What doesn't work? Okay, let me just kind of double back what I said about the acting here. The acting here is memorable, and I think it suits some of the cheesiness of the film. but it also has some of the worst acting on one of these type of films. Now, everyone kind of remembers Raul Julia as, you know, as Bison, Jean-Claude Van Damme as Guile, and I really enjoyed the original '95 Mortal Kombat film. You know, the acting was, you know, okay for those kind of cheesy products. This one, the acting, I have to say, from a lot of the cast, not everyone, but a lot of the cast is pretty bad. Pretty bad. In actual fact, I suspect, I couldn't find any confirmation of this, but a lot of it looks like it's been redubbed. Particularly Devon Okai's character, who really does not look like she is saying the words that are coming out of her mouth. But she isn't the only one. And even actors who, you know, who clearly are speaking, Holly Valance, for example, not good acting. The acting here, you know, you can be quite forgiving because it's a cheesy fight game based on women with big boobs, you know, flailing around. You're not really expecting, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis style quality acting here, but, you know, there's levels of expectations, and this one is pretty bad, even for a kind of a cheesy film like this. Again, I just want to kind of double back on what I said about some of the stuff I liked. The fight scenes are good, but there's a little bit of overuse of wire work here. It's just kind of like, at times, you just look like you're watching people on swings, I think. They just maybe do it a little bit too much. The plot is completely kind of bunkum. It's a generic tournament with the idea being that Eric Roberts' character wants to essentially download the fighters' moves so he can sell them on the black market to other people. What use is that? I mean, unless you're a professional kind of like martial arts in tournaments, what use is it? I mean, it's not as if it's a weapon that you can use against, you know, just use a gun, things like this. It's just like, it's the actual reason the bad guy is having this plot is stupid. It's just like really, really silly. And Eric Roberts, I think, was a bad choice to play this our main bad guy. His final fight scene is embarrassing, I have to say. Some characters here are severely shortchanged, and I have to say I think there's too many characters, because there's not really one central protagonist. It really focuses on three of our main characters. Say Holly Valance's character Chrissy, who is like a kind of assassin. You've got Tina, played by Jamie Presley, who's like a female wrestler who wants to kind of prove she is tough. And then we have Devon Okai's character, who is kind of like this ninja princess, or its name I forget. They all have kind of fairly kind of equal kind of screen time, and within that there's kind of there's characters that are kind of related to them. There's like Aaran, who is like this other kind of like ninja with purple hair and stuff, and she barely registers as a character. There's I think maybe too many characters. I mean, the original Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat films, those games didn't have as many characters because there just simply wasn't as many at that point in the game series. And I think the movies benefited from having a little less of a head count here, because if he's one of your favourite characters, they're going to be shortchanged. And as I've said, I used to like Bayman. He was the character I played with, or Leon, one of the two of them. And, you know, they're just kind of shortchanged. There's the character from Ninja Gaiden as well. He's also in this. I've forgotten the character's name. But anyway, yeah, so the character work here, I think, is it's not focused enough. The storytelling here, you don't really have a central protagonist. I think the kind of the acting is all very kind of obviously cheesy character motivations. There's characters like there's a guy called Max, who's not even in the games, and again here it takes screen time away from kind of our central characters. It's very, very flimsy characterization, very flimsy motivations and things like this. And it all becomes a little bit Charlie's Angels. Let me just say this. You might say, oh, how does this movie compare to the likes of Mortal Kombat? How does it compare to Street Fighter? It doesn't really. This is more like Charlie's Angels. And I'm talking about that kind of like the Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore movies, those sort of things. That's what it reminds me of. It's a fun movie, but it's and it has some good fight scenes, but it's just not very memorable in regards to the kind of like the actual characters themselves. They don't really stand out. I really enjoy, for example, Raul Julia as a Bison. I thought they got some of the other characters right. And the same with Mortal Kombat. I thought some of the characters right there was, even though it's a silly, cheesy movie, this one, it just seems a little bit too light. And the story of surrounding them, again, even though you would expect it to be somewhat silly, you don't really kind of feel there's not a lot of stakes. The kind of the motivation from the bad guy is weak. The bad guy himself is weak. Certainly not a patch on Shang Tsung or Bison from obviously the two main fighting games. So overall, it becomes a cheap version of those sort of films. A cheap version of video game fighting movies that were never really particularly well regarded. It has an element of fun, but it's just a little silly. I will give it a 5 out of 10 though, because I do think, visually speaking at least, it's well made and it is well shot. And you can oogle lots of kind of like sexy women, and the fight scenes are quite well shot. But there's some seriously bad character work here and some seriously bad acting and ADR dubbing as well. So it's a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.